This is the Wandering Mike.
Welcome everyone to the Wandering Mike. Today I'm here with John. Hey John, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Good to be here, Mike.
Nice. Great. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think it's going to be an interesting one. Um, so John, if you just want to get us started, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your life, your journey. Who are you?
Well, you're being very kind when you say journey because I would say mostly a lot of detours. Uh, I uh, I went through at least 8 career changes trying to find where I fit. I was a children's home counselor. I went to college, first of all, but came out with no direction. And this was right in the middle of the Vietnam War era. So that was a major issue for all of us in college. So I was working in Detroit as a children's home counselor for 2 years. And then I was a truck driver. And then I was a building contractor. And then I was a fireman, of all things, and each one could have been a career in itself. But then I was a journalist at one point and even a minister for several years, thinking I could be a teacher there. But let's just say, and in between all that, I was even homeless until I met my wife. So the journey had a lot of detours. And I was 53 years old when I finally found what I felt was my place in life when everybody else was retiring. But my wife and I opened our house as a homeless shelter. We founded Good Samaritan Home, a nonprofit, to help people who had struggled finding their place as much as me and more than me. And we started that in 2001 in our own house, sharing a bedroom in our own house. And
Mm.
now we have, 23 years later, we have 19 houses and 10 staff, and we've helped as many as 2,500 people restart their lives. So I would say all those detours brought me here. So that's my introduction, so to speak.
That's already really cool. And there's a lot of questions I want to ask already, but I'm holding holding back because maybe let's do it a little bit chronologically, and then we end up in the here and now. Um, so the first very interesting thing that you mentioned was coming out of college and not really having a direction. I feel like in some sort that's like an everlasting kind of theme. I feel like every generation kind of feels that at
Yeah.
some point, but especially um, during the Vietnam War era. How was that like? Can you take us through that whole? How was it conceived by the people in college?
Well, think of it this way. Think of it like Black Lives Matter, a pro Palestinian protest march, a pro Israel protest march, an anti Trump and a pro Trump rally, all going on every day, everywhere, in every city, all the time. Throw in some campus bombs. And then on
Oh
top of
shit!
that, throw in the draft. That means that you may be required to participate on some level in all of this mess. That was the
Oh,
Vietnam era of the '60s, and the capstone, of course, was Watergate, and I graduated college in '71, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my degree because I was technically overeducated, even though I really hadn't learned a whole lot in college, and I had no direction because I believe, like many people growing up in many working class families, we didn't get the direction, particularly if it was a poor family and education wasn't an issue. Uh, we were just left to ourselves. So I graduated with all of that background, not knowing what to do. So even when I got married, my wife met me when I was actually living in my truck and it was repossessed. So I was homeless when she met me. And what I like to say is that she married me anyway. and we've been together for 47 years. But I credit much
That's
of my
amazing.
stability to her because she put up with me through all of these changes, even after we were married. All these career changes occurred afterward, too. So instability was part of what we grew up with. And I would say the real change probably occurred in the under the Reagan era, where the economy seemed to stabilize. The draft was gone. It had become a volunteer army, and it was only 1% of the people were now involved in warfare, and we were more focused in on making money, and so everything seemed to be much calmer. But all that said, what I'm observing now is that much of what we are going through, the politics, the sociology, the unrest, the worldwide anger and violence, it seems to remind me a great deal of 1968. And when you have all these political assassinations and political unrest, and what I'm finding with many young men is they are like I was. They are drifting. They don't know where they want to go. But what we've added in now is the cell phone or the gaming phone. And so you can
Right.
disappear into your games and you can just be totally oblivious to what's going around you. And like my granddaughter says, young men today seem to have no direction. They don't want to do anything. And I think what they've done is they've checked out. And in some respects, we did that too, but we did it in a more political way. And this generation today concerns me more because at least we had some definition of what we were either for or against. But now I'm not even seeing that. So in many ways, I'm much more concerned about it today than I was in '68.
So that's actually something. Yeah, if we can go into that a little bit more detailed, because it is so cool to have you here who actually undergone those times and has something to compare it to, as a lot of people that are younger don't, because that's all they know. So in your opinion, because obviously technology has a lot of upside to it as well, but I also see a lot of the big downside is past. So what do you think in particular has technology changed about the society?
Well, we used to read about all the Big Brother, for example, in 1984.
Yeah.
We could read about all these things. But today we can actually do those things where Big Brother, in many ways, like right now, I can take this phone and this phone knows where I am and where I've been and what I've been looking at. And there are hundreds and thousands or millions of people who can access that and I'm not even aware of. So in many ways, the convenience of the cell phone where I can call anybody, I can study anything, I can find any information, but all of that can also find me. So I think
Right.
the privacy that we say we value, we have readily given up without even knowing it. And uh, in some respects, I can be very pessimistic about how intrusive the technology can be. It reminds me a bit of Star Trek, where they meet these civilizations who all they wanted to do was find someplace quiet because they were so overwhelmed with noise from their own culture. That's from the original Star Trek back in '66. But all those things were actually very prophetic, like all
Yeah,
good science fiction.
I was about to say, because my mom, she loved Star Trek, and we used to watch the old shows. And I mean, I read 1984 as well, amongst others of Brave New World, and it is kind of weird how these things play out, isn't it?
We look at that and say, "Oh, that'll never happen." Well, for example, in the church, we used to grow up thinking that these all these apocalyptic visions could occur, but we never knew how they would occur. But technologically, we could destroy the world with nuclear bombs on not just Russia and America, but there are a host of countries. And many of the countries who have nuclear capacity don't seem to have the political will to constrain themselves. Uh, I think we are much more fragile today than we ever were in the Cold War. So I almost sound pessimistic, but the truth is, this comes back to my real cause for what we are doing is that we deal with primarily men and women coming from prison who are looking for a second chance. And what I've found is that there's a hunger in our culture today for a second chance. And this pessimism that we see when you look at Facebook and when you look at Instagram and you see all of these quick reels and you see bullies picking on everybody or you see so much anger coming through on Facebook that I think people are just looking for some good news. So, and that's what I try to offer. I don't want to, definitely do not want to focus in on the negative because I feel that Good Samaritan Home and my voice here on this podcast is to represent second chances to everybody. Whether you've been to prison or not, I think in this internet age in particular, where every sin you've ever committed is on the internet forever. How many teenage girls have said, I wish I hadn't done that? And now everybody saw my picture. And I'm saying that you still can get a second chance. And that message seems to be resonating well.
Yes, it's a beautiful thing, and as you've said, we have enough voices of those bad kind of things. It's really refreshing and good to have voices of good out there as well. Um, so yeah, before we actually go into the Good Samaritan thing as well, there's just a lot of interesting things that come up in our conversation, and another thing I wanted to ask because you just compared the two as well, and I kind of had the feeling already during COVID, but then obviously afterwards, it hasn't gotten a lot better. That, like you said, there is a lot of unrest, there's a lot of uncertainty in the people. Kind of like as we've talked about books. I don't know if you know Hemingway's "The Sun Also Rises."
Right.
That deals. So I kind of felt very reminded of that as well. So, what would be your like, what would you tell the younger people that feel this kind of unrest, and how can they still like make sense and enjoyment of their life?
I like to think we in a culture, particularly today with the internet, where everybody portrayed as a hard body, and if you're not, you can do Photoshop and make yourself look like a hard body. I can get all my hair back. I can make it dark. I can drop that 30 pounds I've gained since I was in high school. I can too look like a Hollywood actor, but in reality, this is who I am. And whatever you are is who you are. And I would say that when you look at Facebook and when you look at Instagram and you look at all these shows on television, on a cable, where everybody looks and acts so perfect, the truth is that nobody is perfect. So I would say to somebody, it's not a sprint where you have to run fast and succeed by 25. You're not going to found Facebook or PayPal, and you're not going to invent the electric automobile by the time you're 25 like Elon Musk. But what you can do is that you can take care of where you are today. And like Dr. King said, if your job is to sweep streets, then you just simply sweep that street to the best of your ability so the people will look at that street and say, damn, somebody did a very good job here. And that's how I think you gain control of the pessimism around us is that you do something very well today. And in our houses, we tell people to start by making your bed because when you go out to look for a job, you're going to be rejected once, twice, 5 times, maybe 200 times. But at the end of the day, you come back, your bed is made and your room is clean. And you say to yourself, I did that right. Tomorrow will be better. And that's an old Navy SEAL trick that I've read about. And no matter what you go through, you have control over your corner of the world. And that I believe is just enough to get through. So that's what I'd recommend is keep running.
Right. Um, Maybe to tie that in into something else that is remarkable about your journey, because I feel again like this is coming back nowadays, or not coming back, but nowadays it's more of a normal to not after college go into a job, work that job until you're 65, 70, but rather have a change of careers, do something for a couple of years and do something else. And that's obviously something you did in your life. So from having those experiences, what can you share with people that maybe feel like, should I pursue a change of career? I don't feel like this is for me. And maybe they want to keep on and they don't know what they should do.
I would probably recommend that people move smarter than I did
Yeah.
because one of the reasons in the 60s, it was easy. I remember I was in college and I was in Kentucky and I wanted to go see a girl. So I stuck my thumb out, hitchhike up to New York City. And then she said, I really don't want to see you. So I turned around and hitchhiked to San Francisco. And and then I hitchhiked back. And I think I lost 20 or 30 pounds on that trip. And I had
Oh,
nothing. I had $10 in my pocket and when I got back, I was covered with road dirt, and I looked like a hobo. But the trouble is that you pay a price because people my age who had gotten a job and stayed with it now then they had the stability that actually took me 30 years to get. So I would say if
right.
you want to make the next step, plan it and be prepared for it so that you can make a reasoned step. Uh, it's like they say about houses you don't trade down, you always try to trade up to a better house. Or as some women say, you trade up to a better husband. So you have to plan. Uh, but coming out of the 60s, it was easier to just be free form about it. Uh, and I will say this that because of my moving like this, my children today are much more stable. They're in the same job, the same house, and they'll retire out of that because they know that stability has its benefits. And their children, my granddaughter wants to be a writer, so she'll probably come back and be more like me. She's more of a free spirit.
That's
So life has a way of being cyclical.
right. So that's obviously a big theme that we now kind of think we grasped onto pretty good is that yearning for stability. So would you say is that the main reason why you started the Good Samaritan Home? And why, when you started it, did you concentrate on people coming out of prison, especially?
What happened was I was getting people coming to my door. And I was at the time I was pastoring in a church, and I was never very good at it because pastoring a church tends to be very, I say, civilized, and I've never been that civilized because
Okay.
too many times the church is about being the status quo, and
Right.
you can tell from my resume that I've never been good at status quo. So somebody would come to my door and say, "Can we help? Can you help me? I'm homeless." And I couldn't do anything, and my church wouldn't allow me to do anything because they were uncomfortable with those people. So
Right.
finally, what I did was I left the church and I said, I'm going to take control And if we see somebody who needs help more than needed help, I'm not going to let it go. That's where we got the idea to start a homeless shelter. And we did that because we had no income. We did it out of our own house. But
Right.
what happened was the Department of Corrections saw that and they asked us if we would take people coming from prison who were homeless. They were low risk, but they simply needed housing temporarily. And what they did was they paid us for the state paid us for that stay. So if somebody's in jail, it costs the state $90 a day. But if they're in a shelter like ours, it costs a fraction of that. So
Right.
we had a contract and we had 4 beds and we were able to buy another house and fix it up because of my background. And we were able to get 6 beds. And then we had another house and another house. And eventually we were able to hire staff. And so what happened was now on any given day, we might have 80 men who are on parole who are homeless. But because they're now in stable housing, they can get a job, they can pay child support, they can pay taxes on their income, they can buy groceries, and they can buy goods in the community. And also, they won't go back to jail. That's the best part. So instead of costing you and I $25,000 a year in jail costs per person, now they're putting that money back, 25 or $30,000 into the community. So it's win-win.
Right.
I like to say the Republicans can like that, and so can the Democrats, because everybody wins.
Yeah, it sounds, yeah, there's no one that shouldn't like that idea. Um,
Now, I need to caution you that it was not easy. I make it sound easy, but the truth was there was a lot of blowback from the community when we started because they didn't want those people in the neighborhood. And there were petitions passed, there were council meetings, there was ordinances passed, there were threats. I even had police protection going to one meeting because it was so difficult. And we ended up suing the city 3 times over this. But eventually, those same critics are now our supporters because in time, by simply being a good neighbor and not the danger that they thought we were, now those same people are our supporters. So, but that took 7 years. It was not easy.
that's actually what I wanted to ask about as well, because I mean, I would imagine that 99% of people, if you told them, should we give people coming out of jail a second chance? Should we do whatever we can to help them if there is something we can do? I think, or I hope people would say, yes, of course we should do everything to help them. Um, but then you always have that thing. If it happens in your neighborhood right next door, for some reason, people would say, well, do it somewhere else. Don't do it next to my house.
Ab-
So why do you think
Absolutely.
that is?
Well, the old saying is not in my backyard. Because
Yeah.
NIMBY, yeah, everybody wants that program somewhere else. And generally, what happens is these all these programs go into the worst neighborhoods, the poorest neighborhoods. Highways are cut through the poorest neighborhoods, and prisons are put in the poorest neighborhoods because the rich people can afford to oppose it. So we
Right.
decided that the research shows that people do best if they're in real neighborhoods, not in artificial housing like a halfway house is. So by being in
Mm.
our neighborhood, they can be normal. And you get on the bus, you go to work. And like we tell our residents, that our house is the cleanest, it's the quietest, and we are the best neighbor because you don't want to cast a shadow here because you have to run harder, you have to work harder, and you have to do it more than anybody else just to prove that you're equal. And we all may be equal, but you have to prove it when you're coming out of prison.
And I mean, obviously, um, well, I don't know. There is obviously a lot of success stories I can suppose, but just to play the other side as well a little bit here, um, has that motivation ever gone the other way as well? Because you would imagine people taking that and being motivated from it, but obviously this is just human as well. Like you can feel it like this, and all these things weigh down on you. Did that go the other direction as well?
Yeah, in theory, if you give somebody an opportunity, they'll say thank you, and then their life will turn around, and they'll come to Jesus, so to speak, and they'll be suddenly model citizens. The truth is, that's not nearly what happens. You get some, you give them a chance, and they'll take it and run with it. You get others that they will try, and because they don't have the tools, they'll fall down. Then you'll get some who say, "I don't give a damn." And they'll take advantage of the situation, and they'll go backwards, and you offer the hand and they'll slap your hand. But the bottom line is that the way the system is set up, if you're given a sentence for a crime, at the end of that sentence you must be released. And if you're released and you don't have a job, and especially don't have housing, then you can't even look for a job. So we know you're going to fail if you don't have housing. So, what I offer is a chance. What you do with it is up to you. I can't make you take it. I can't make you succeed, but I can offer it. Now, we hold them accountable. That's where the housekeeping comes in. And we have a curfew, and we have what we call a pronoun shift. What got you in jail was I want, I need, I'm going to get it now. So, with a roommate and a housemate, and having make your bed, for example, or clean up after yourself, we teach you to think we are living together. Instead of saying I want, you say what is good for us. And that's, I think, is a key component to rehabilitation, shifting from I to we. And if you don't get it, you don't get it. And either you'll leave or you'll be terminated. But if you want to get it, we will help you.
Yes. I think, like you just said, that's one of the um, biggest thing in any human's life is having a community that they kind of belong to, that they can kind of find outer purpose rather than just their singular purpose to themselves. So I think that's a good helping point.
I had a fella just write me today. He's been with us for several months, and he's got a serious crime, and he did his time in prison, and now he's on probation, and he was homeless because he had no family or anywhere to go, and he struggles with mental health issues, and at times he would get depressed, and he would check himself into a clinic until he could stabilize. And he wrote to us today and said, "If it hadn't been for Good Samaritan Home, I would be back in jail." And we didn't do anything special, but we just treated him as one of our own. We treated him as an equal, and we spent time. And mostly what my staff does is they just listen to him. And they didn't say, "You need and you should." They said, "How are you doing today? How can I help?" That to me is the magic word. How can I help?
Right. Um, obviously, also not everyone has all the same um, opportunities, or we don't have properties where we can house people. But that point you just said, is that something that you would wish the world just to do more often when we're out on the street? If we see people, just approaching them, like you said, as an equal, and see how are you doing? Like, well, what's up?
David Brooks writes for the Atlantic magazine as well as the New York Times, and he said something very interesting about our society today. He said we have devolved into a tribal society where we're all labeled. Before we were labeling ourselves by saying, I'm an Asian American or I'm a Hispanic American, or my wife will say, I'm Irish American. But what happens is that may be cute for festivals, but when we devolve and decline into this idea of, uh, I'm 6 shades of gender, or 6 shades of black, or 6 shades of white, and out of that, we are tribalizing, and we're saying, instead of us, we're saying you, and we're pointing and separating from one another. So I think the only way to overcome that is to not be color blind, but be color neutral, and you just treat people like people. I really don't care what side of the plate you bat on. I really don't care. If somebody's hungry, they're hungry, or maybe just maybe just listening to somebody. You don't have to give advice, just listen. I would not recommend that people take a stranger into their home, but there are ways that you can help a stranger. And some of that might be maybe just taking them to McDonald's. Instead of giving them $10, say, how about if I buy you lunch? And just sit there and just talk or listen.
And this is something that can enrich your life as well, because a lot of people, or I would even go to say everyone, has an interesting story, and everyone you can learn something from in any, like, in whatever respect that may be. So,
What I have found is that almost everybody we deal with comes from a home that is at best dysfunctional. The fathers almost always were non-existent. The mothers were many times addicted, or they had so many visitors that they had no idea who their father was. And often the grandmother or foster care was who raised them. So if you're, it's like asking somebody to learn to fly because they have no idea what's involved, and just say, just flap your wings. Eh, they don't, they can't even begin to do that. And so when Nancy Reagan would say, just say no to drugs, that to me was spoken from somebody who never dealt with the issue, because statistically you cannot say no overnight. You fail and try and fail and try, and you keep trying until eventually you do overcome it with support.
do you think that you um, always had that kind of insight? Because again, I'm just thinking that for a lot of people, um, it makes sense, and I totally agree with everything you just said. But I feel like it's a hard thing for people to really believe in their brain, because they say, "Well, you did this thing, you messed up 5 times. Why would it go good just 6 times? So why when did you develop that belief in people?"
Probably because I've been thrown down so many times and rejected so many times that uh, I thought of it like there's a movie called Officer and a Gentleman, where he goes through Navy pilots training, and he had an attitude and he was an incorrigible student. And the drill sergeant worked hard to get him thrown out because he said, you're not an officer candidate. And finally, he pushed him so hard, Richard Gere broke, and he said, I got nowhere else to go. I have no choice. And then he learned to think like an officer, because he finally realized that he needed others. And that's how I was. I grew up alone. I thought I could do it my own, and I got so used to failure, I thought this was normal. And I'll give you a perfect example. When I wrote my book, it's called Running as Fast as I Can, and it's fiction, but it's about a boy who struggled like we're talking, trying to find his place. He came from abuse, and he struggled to see where he fit in. and to find a new family. And I thought I spent 10 years writing it, and I wrote it 24 times until I had it to where I felt it was right. And I had a professional editor. And at the end of the product, I've sent it out to agents and to publishers. And for 2 years, it was rejected and rejected and rejected 200 times. And I, whenever I got a rejection, it got to the point where I expected the rejection. Rejection was my normal. And it didn't matter that I thought I had a good story because nobody agreed with that until all of a sudden we found a publisher, Don Quixote Press. Uh, and ironic that Don Quixote tilts at windmills. And
Yeah.
so Don Quixote published a book, and in the past 10 months, we have garnered 26 awards for literary excellence. And today, I expect to get a winner. I expect an award. I don't
Oh,
think
wow.
I'll get a rejection now, but I had to simply again and again and again keep trying and never, never give in to that rejection spirit, even though it goes right to your core. Just you have to say, I got nowhere else to go. I got to keep trying. And now that book has sold thousands of copies, and readers are writing me today saying, I'm Daniel. I understand Daniel. Thank you for writing. And to me, that makes it all worthwhile.
So, yeah, if you just want to, since you mentioned your book, tell us a little bit more about what sparked that. So even before you tried to publish it, what was the intention of writing a book? Why is that something that was important to
Well, one thing I learned way back in the 60s was journaling. It's something that was very, very popular and very common in the 60s. Uh, we were rather self absorbed, so we like to get our own thoughts out there. But I call it cheap therapy. You just write your thoughts down. And so in 1968, I started writing in my journal. And 4,000 pages later, I was still writing 50 years. And I thought I was going to write a book back in 68, but I sat down at a Royal portable typewriter and there was no screen, there was no cord, there was no word processing. It was all punch, punch, punch. But I had nothing to say. So I put that aside until this end of my life. And I realized that when you're writing a story about someone's journey to find healing or to find forgiveness or to find happiness, you can't write it from the beginning of your journey. You have to live it. So the
it?
story is not about me, but the emotions are mine. And I've had people say, in fact, my publicist said she's only cried over 5 books, and she's a professional. And she said, Running as Fast as I Can was one of them. She cried over it. And that to me was what I wanted. I wanted people to feel the story of Daniel Robinson. I call it everyone's story.
So you believe that it's a story that everyone can kind of feel themselves into.
Oh, I absolutely, because I think everybody to some degree feels like they came from a home where they were disconnected or maybe emotionally abused, or in my case, emotionally abandoned. How many people grow up? For example, I went to my high school reunion, and I was surprised at how many people were sons and daughters of doctors or attorneys or professional people, and they were expected to go to college. They were expected to go into the profession. They were taught what to do and where to go. And I was taught none of that. And I realized that they are unusual. Most of us just drifted and we graduated high school and then got a job. And that was fine if the economy allowed for the working class. But the working class disappeared in the 80s. The mills were gone. The Ohio economy was devastated by the auto industry moving out, and where you used to have a middle class family working at the auto factory, today you don't. You have that same man and wife working 4 jobs in service, working at restaurants, just trying to make ends meet, or temp services. So it's much, much more difficult without some sort of skill now.
So, um, what would you say to people that, because we talked about the young people, but what would you say to people of your age that kind of lost a sense of direction and maybe say, oh,
Yeah.
it's not worth starting something new? And obviously, you are an example for you're still doing these things, you're still reinventing yourself in this age.
Should I talk about climbing Mount Whitney last year?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Uh, that was a tough one. I made it up to 13,600, but,
Oh, wow.
and I was glad for that, but I think I left my left lung somewhere around 12,000 feet. But I'll give you a good example of my best embodiment of my philosophy that I can share with someone else. I was in Texas, where I write, and there was an ad in the paper that said, Harrison Ford's program, television series 1923, is looking for extras. They want walk ons to just be in a street scene and no acting experience required. So I put my name in and I sent my picture in. I had my Texas hat on. And I thought, well, what the heck? And they
Yeah.
called me the next day and said, we'd like you to be in this part. Could you come to Austin and get fitted out for a costume? And by golly, they fitted me out and I got the part in the television show. And of course, they cut my scene, but it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
I got
No,
$32
that,
for my part. So officially, I'm an actor, 76 years old. And now I can add actor to my resume. And here's my point: try something new. Don't sit in front of the television and watch The View and say, "What are the ladies gonna say now?" Or don't watch Regis Philbin or The Price is Right. Don't watch cable news of because then you'll shoot yourself if you watch enough of that. But get out and do something out of your comfort zone. Do something different. And maybe it might be just planting a garden, but it might be trying something different that you've never done before. And I think I may be 76, but I feel like I'm 36. And my body sometimes doesn't, but my mind definitely feels 36.
that is the best way to keep young, right? Just, I mean, that's what I hope to be doing, to be honest. Just learn every day, just try and learn something new every day. And I can imagine it getting harder when you have lived more, when you have seen a lot more stuff. But that's what I'm aspiring to still be doing always.
Sometimes it's something so simple as driving a different route, go to a different city. Just try, and that's why I went to Mount Whitney because that was a tough climb. But
Yeah.
we did that because it was totally new experience and it stretched all of us. And now we can look back, and I've had 2 years worth of memories out of that. And of course, my memories are bigger than reality. My story gets bigger every time I tell it. That's the beautiful thing about being a fiction writer. I get to lie with
Right.
impunity. But that's my best advice. Don't stop. There's no word retirement that I can find anywhere in the Bible. You're always doing something for the betterment of humanity, hopefully.
Yeah. Um, but what you just said about fiction writing, is that part of why you chose to write a fiction book rather than maybe a nonfiction book and just like giving advice? Is because you want to put it into entertaining framework, or is that the reason?
Absolutely, absolutely. I wrote an academic book about rehabilitation and reentry, and I did
Mm,
10 years worth of study and research on it, and it was well documented, 200 pages thick with full of research. And the 3 people who read it said it was good. So because nobody reads a how to. That's like your mother pointing a finger and saying, "You need to stop doing that." Uh, what we need to do, I compare it to, let's suppose that you want to caution people about lifeboat safety because you're going on a cruise. So you want to tell people, here's how you have to practice with the lifeboats. Nobody will care. But let's suppose you put Jack and Rose on the Titanic and you have a love story and you have all that social upheaval and you have young Jack coming in and wooing away Rose and rescuing her from a terrible relationship. And in the end, Rose survives and she says, I'll never let go of you, Jack. And she spends her life reinventing herself because of Jack. But the story is lifeboat safety will change your life. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make Daniel's story of second chances something that you would remember the rest of your life. And you would turn the pages and say, I can't wait to read the next page. And now that's why thousands of people instead of 3 people have read it. Make it easy for people to learn something and make it fun. And that's why I did it. And truth is, I felt like I'd given birth. I felt like I gave birth to a 1,000-pound baby. And I just felt like if I die today, I've at least done my part to makes a difference in the world with that story. I told you I get
yes.
very animated when I talk.
No, it's great. It's great to actually see someone's real passion, and I'm loving it. Um, you took us through your journey as well. You told us a little bit about the publishing journey, but you also hinted at the writing journey. So, how difficult was it? Because you said you rewrote it a
Really
couple of times to really, and
2024.
yeah, was it, were you ever, I mean, at the end, I think perfect is a word we can never achieve, but how hard was it to really say, okay, now this really portrays and has everything in there that I wanted to show to the.
It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done because my training as a journalist was to bring out facts, and I'm very good at
Right.
research. And my training as an academic, because I have a doctorate in applied theology, so I understand how to do research, and I can present a very factual presentation. But my first draft had Daniel Robinson almost as a stick figure. He came into the room, he said this, he did that, he left the room. And the story had no passion. And in fact, I had an editor read it at one point and he said, I hate Daniel. I just don't like the guy. And I thought, that's not going to work. So here was this editor who was 1/3 of my age and twice my intellect, I believe, because he taught me how to bring emotion into the story. And he would say,
Right.
let's do this. Let's paint this picture in the background. Use words that have colorful meaning to them. Describe the sunset. What's Daniel's looking like when he says that? Or describe his feelings when he first sees Kate, the girl he knew he would love after a whole lifetime. No, what's he? How does you don't just say he liked her or he loved her or his heart beat fast. You have to describe his heart beating so fast it was coming out of his chest. His breathing was hard. He had to look away because he was embarrassed at how much he was staring at her. And he taught me how to write three-dimensionally. And and at the time, I was 74, so most people would struggle with that, but I was learning a whole new language, a language of emotion. And that was extremely difficult, but it was exactly what I wanted. So I give my editor a great deal of credit.
Yeah, that's really cool.
No, it's
Um,
painful.
I guess in hindsight, it's yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the story line as well, right? It's we have
Well,
to go through the pains of things
well, I
sometimes.
cursed at him more than once. Trust me.
Yeah. Um, and then maybe just to make that more clear as well. When you were publishing, because I mean, obviously you're published now and you won all these prizes, but at some point we don't know. So if we get rejected, you said 200 times, how do we know what what's the right move to keep pushing to say, okay, maybe everyone else is right? How do we find that answer to for us?
That's a very good question. When I wrote the first draft and I sent it out and I got a rejection, I had to be very honest in saying, because I would get critiques as well. And if the critique said, as the one did, I don't like Daniel. I don't like this. Or I don't understand it, or it's confusing. Then you know you have to rewrite. But if you've rewritten it and you've gotten what we call beta feedback from readers who are just reading it to be readers and to give you their feelings, and if you get all that input over time and you've written one draft, two drafts, three drafts, you reach a point where you say, this is the absolute best I can do. And when I reached that point, and then when I got the rejections, I had to tell myself, it's not me. I've done my best. And that's where you have to dig really deep. And that's why we work so hard to find what we call a second chance publisher. Don Quixote Press is for outcasts like me. It's an outsider press for outsider writers who are telling a story about outsiders. And I believe that there's an audience for us outsiders. And so when we put that out there, and then we started getting the awards. And I just got one yesterday for, it was the winner of the American Writing Awards general fiction contest. And that to me means a great deal because it took me 10 months of application and publishing to get these awards. And it's not the awards, it's the fact that it's vindication. What I felt, what I knew to be right, it took 10 years to get here, but it was worth every rejection because as long as you edit as best you can and you edit your book and then you edit your life, that's what I say. You're always editing. And at the end of the day, you say, this is the best. And if you like it, good. If you don't, I can accept that because somebody else will like it. And the reviews have shown that to be true. On Amazon, I'm listed as 4.5 out of 5, which is I think, very good.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very pleased with that. That means that 90% of the people have called it a 5-star book, and and I'm not trying to talk about me. I'm just saying, no matter what happens, just keep on trying, and the not success, but the results will come. If you've done your absolute best, it will come.
Yeah. So you just talked about editing your life. Um, so obviously you have this very good thing going on, the Good Samaritan Hope, which is taken up, I suppose, a lot of time as well. But what do you see in your future? What are things that you want to get into as well that maybe you're not into yet? Maybe is there more writing to come? What's sort of happening right now in your life?
Yeah, well, I did start a sequel called Requiem, but I've been so busy with the publish end of it because I have to do much of the legwork myself. The independent publishers require you do much of the work, which is fine.
Yeah.
And so right now, I thought podcasting would be about sharing about the book. But the truth is that all the podcasts I'm on, what we talk about are second chances. And it's much broader than just my book. My book is just the icing, but second chances, that's the real cake. That's the heart of it. And my full time is being spent, even though I'm still with Good Samaritan Home. I'm advocating and I'm yelling from the mountaintop. Second chances. Everybody, everybody deserves a second chance.
So that's basically one question I ask everyone that comes to the podcast is what sort of role legacy plays in their life. So would you say that's your legacy that you want to leave is make people aware of second chances?
I hadn't thought about it, but I think that's correct. I think so, because particularly in this internet age and Facebook age where your mistakes are in ink. One of the phrases I use in the book quite a few times is the life is not written in ink, it's written in pencil because the internet and Facebook tends to put all our flaws, all our stupid things in ink. And I'm saying that you can still erase it. It's really not ink. And so if that's my legacy, then I think, then that's a life that I'm comfortable with.
So to that point, what would you say that the world, or maybe if you just want to say it for the United States in particular, but what do we need more of to
Mm.
go towards the life that you want to see, the community you want to see?
Back in 1963, during the civil rights movement, uh, what made the civil rights movement so strong and so effective was that it was a morally based, theologically based movement. It wasn't about one person trying to assert black people or black power. It was about humanity coming together regardless of your color. And Dr. King was speaking from a clearly Christian perspective in the true sense of the term Christian. And he was trying to live that faith in the community in very practical ways. And he became the conscience, not just of the church, but of the entire nation. But in 1966, it started to shift. And within the Black community, there was this Black power. The idea was that you had your power, Whitey. Now we are going to have our power. And that was Stokely Carmichael. And Dr. King died in 68. And before he died, he was being pushed aside because of the anger that was boiling up. And I think we have not seen a voice like that. So I would say that the we're going through very similar movements now with all these little tribes saying, I want this power, I want that power. And I think if we were to come back to a moral basis, and I'm very careful to say that it's a church basis because I think the church has become compromised in many ways through politics. So I would say we have to come back and we have to be the church as it was intended to be. And the church, I think, is much broader than we like to think. It's not Baptist, it's not Catholic. It's all those who believe in God and try to live as if they are God's hands and feet. And if you are representative of God, then you have to live as if God is in the room with you. And that's how you treat people. So at the end of the day, they say, he made a difference. She made a difference in my life. So, and I think that message applies today more than ever. Uh, I've been doing a lot of writing on Substack, uh, and what I'm realizing is that there's just so much anger out there that people are just looking for somebody to say, uh, "Can you show me a direction? Can you give me some hope?" And if you watch cable news long enough, I think your head will explode. And so, and then again, if you watch Facebook long enough, I think your head will explode too. So, I just tell people that maybe just start with one little step. And maybe just stopping to talk to one person. One person might make a difference in your day and definitely his.
Yes. Um, I personally stopped watching the news 10 years ago as well, just because I don't want to, yeah, feel very negative the whole time. I'm trying to feel very positive. And do you think that we lost this connection to the real world in some sorts? Because, like you said, we don't really talk too much anymore. Maybe we're losing the sense of community a little bit, or maybe not. Is that something you would agree with?
Actually, you're onto something there because there's a book actually been written called Bowling Alone. And the premise is that we used to, in the 50s, coming out of the Depression, coming out of the war, our parents, your grandparents, were very involved in creating community because they realized what they'd come through, and they wanted to have a stable neighborhood, a stable family, a safe place for their children because they've been in hell. They knew what it was like. And so service organizations, clubs, churches, bowling, all these community events were very popular. Then television came in, and then the rock and roll era, where don't trust anyone over 30, and we started separating from one generation to the next. And then I think what happened is we s- we said whatever my parents did, I don't want to do it, so we went the opposite direction. And yes, I absolutely believe that when, particularly with the advent of the cell phone, we have retreated inwardly. And so you have an audience of yourself. And so you may, all you look at all day long is your own small tribe, your own little sphere of influence, and you never find somebody new. I'll give you a good example. When I go to Texas in San Antonio, it's 65% Hispanic. So I never know when I go into a store or a restaurant if the language that I'm surrounded with will be Spanish or English because I'm a minority. Anglos are 35% of the population. So I have to work hard to be prepared to speak Spanish. And I don't do it well at all. But I've learned what it feels like to be a minority. And that keeps me sharp and it keeps me focused because I've learned there's so much in the Hispanic community that I've missed out on that is very beautiful. And the highlight of my day is going to a Spanish mass and not understanding a word, but feeling the service, feeling the people. And I feel like I'm a better person for being in someone else's culture.
Yes, that's something I definitely agree with 100%. Having traveled a lot, just embracing yourself in different cultures and seeing all the different nuances as well. Seeing that at the end of the day, we're all humans, but seeing the interesting aspects of all the different cultures and how different cultures handle things differently is something that definitely enriches our lives.
And there's a tendency, I think, today to if we disagree with somebody, we want to prove them wrong. But I would say you can disagree with somebody, but just ask them to explain their position or defend their position, not in a negative way, but in an academic way. Well, how would you support that premise? Because they may have something that you've missed, and maybe you're still your position is still correct, but maybe it can be stronger by listening to them. So I would encourage people to discuss ideas that they don't agree with. It's like the old high school debate team. You would take an issue, take a side in the debate for the first half, and then the second half you would take the other side, and you'd have to argue both sides. Now that to me is good discipline.
Yes. And that sorry. Um, that to me actually is a good way of ending it. Actually, that's a good a good last part of Intel, especially these days. So, John, I could ask you so many more questions, but
Well, my brains are just
um,
about fried anyway, so don't don't let me
ex-
embarrass myself.
exactly. So, if finally you just again want to tell us, we talked about the Good Samaritan Home. We talked about your book. You mentioned you write on Substack as well. So, if you can just let the people know if they're intrigued by our conversation, where can they find out more about you? And obviously, all the links I'll put in the description as well for people to discover.
Easiest way is just go to johndavidgraham.com and it'll have links to Substack, links to Good Samaritan Home, or even links to the Amazon page for the book and those 3 free chapters I talked about. But I'll
Right.
guarantee you, if you read 3 chapters, you will not put it down. It's just a damn good story. That's all I can say.
Nice. I'll check it out because I am actually intrigued. I'll definitely read those chapters.
It's worth every
Um,
dime you won't have to spend.
Amazing. Well, John, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights with us. And I hope you have a good rest of the day.
You've made my day. I really get excited, maybe too excited talking about this, but I feel like I feel like I'm on top of Mount Whitney, and I'm looking all around at the valley around me, and I'm just in awe of the potential and the beauty of what I'm seeing. So thank you for the privilege of being here.
Of course. Thank you, John. And bye, everyone.